Happy Monday, everyone. It's just another manic Monday. Oh. I see some people in the chat already. Calix Boxing 2.0. Hit the sub and the like. Calix Boxing 2 over on Twitter. CalixBoxing.com. What y'all think about Danny? What y'all think about old Danny boy at 154? We're going to be talking about the picture at 154. How Danny looked in the glorified sparring session on Showtime's main event. Everybody's freaking out about Jake Paul, right? Jake Paul, oh my God, the weight. It's Jake Paul's fight. No, it's Hasim's fault. No. It's his fault. No, it's his fault. Calm down. Calm down. This is Jake Paul. This is Jake Paul we're talking about. All right, so we'll be talking about all that. Also, Antoine Russell and his fight. Kaunaki and his fight. The undercard fights were fun. They were fun. So we got to that main event. D Nice in the building. Salute to you. I was half right. I thought it would be a split decision or majority decision for Garcia, but I thought it would be more exciting than that. I did as well. I thought it would have exciting moments, and it did not. More on that in a minute, but you were right about the split decision. What an awful card, 114. This is what I talk about with the corruption of boxing. And you saw the stoppage when it came to the Antoine Russell fight. It's like he gets up at 3. He's shaking his head. Yes, I hear you. Yes, I hear you. And the ref said, nope. I understand you got up at 3. I understand you coherently told me you're ready, but I don't think you're ready. We're going to stop the fight. Corruption. So this is what I talk about, but fun fight nonetheless. And then we get how anybody could watch that fight, Danny Garcia versus Jose Benavidez, and see 6 rounds to give to Benavidez. I mean, it's just beyond me. And at that point, it can't be incompetence, because when you work so many championships, you have to work so many championship fights in order to get to where you're a judge on a Danny Garcia Showtime main event. So it's not them having an off night. An off night would be 116, 112, because he didn't even win 4 rounds. And there was a 116, 112 card. So that's an off night. But 114 for a fight like that is corruption. And I don't know why. I don't know why they would score a draw for Benavidez. So maybe it just is incompetence, but either way, it's not good. 114. What are you looking at? And you did a good job of going to Disneyland instead of watching this main event. Salute to Chicano Prophet in the building. Stud Togs Boxing in the building. Yep, let's get it. And I got a lot of heat coming today because I've been itching to get on this microphone all weekend. I have, because some stuff broke over the weekend, and it's just people's reaction to this stuff that irks me. And I just feel the itch of getting behind the microphone and trying to give my opinion on it. It was whatever for me. I actually expected him to do better, to be honest. Second awful stoppage for him. Yeah, I saw an awful one a couple of years ago as well that he had. Salute to Marion Brown. Danny looked great, and Benavidez looked strong and healthy to me. Man, just didn't see that. Look, Danny, you could say Danny looked great, but Danny was supposed to look great. This is what he was supposed to do. But to say Benavidez looked strong and healthy, he was dragging that right leg across the ring all fight. And maybe it's people who haven't seen Benavidez in the past before he got shot that say maybe he looks healthy. I don't know how you can see that, but he's dragging his right leg. He cannot move. He's throwing more hip thrusts than he is punches. He's shaking his head no more than he's throwing punches. He's not throwing punches. He can only fight in spurts. He would win a round or 2 here and there, giving it his all. And then the next round, you would see huge drop off because he had nothing left after throwing that spurt fighting hard for three minutes. He had nothing. He had nothing. This fight is what we expected. This fight, Vegas told you coming in, minus 800 favorite. They told you Danny Garcia's the A side. He's moving up to 154. He's fighting a guy who was fighting at welterweight as well at 154. This is what you're supposed to see. This is what you're supposed to see. More on that in a minute. But let's, before we get into Danny Garcia and the multi-weight division scam that's being run by a lot of fighters in boxing right now, and we'll be talking, I'll be giving a lot of examples of guys who are doing it. And we'll be talking about Danny Garcia plenty. And I want to talk about Gary Antoine Russell as well in 140-pound division. But the Jake Paul stuff has been bothering me because I haven't, as you guys know, you were right, Danny looked sharp, but the power wasn't there. That's right. I haven't talked about Jake Paul at all on this channel. At all. Not at all. Haven't done a single video about it. Haven't talked about it in any of my lives. But I just want to lift that embargo real quick for about 5 minutes to talk about Jake Paul, because I mostly want to talk about people's reaction to Jake Paul. Look, you can't go to a circus and be surprised when clowns pop up. You can't go to a circus and be surprised when a bearded lady pops up. You can't turn on Cinemax at 1 a.m. and be shocked when nipples pop up. It's called Skinemax for a reason. You can't turn on the Rachel Ray show and it's like, she's talking about cooking. It's like, yes, it's a cooking show. She's talking about cooking. It's a cooking show. What did you expect? A crime drama? This is Rachel Ray. She has a cooking show. You go there to watch cooking. Jake Paul is a circus act. He's a circus act. Okay? This is not meant to be taken seriously. So now we're at a point where boxing journalists are taking this guy seriously. Like this is a serious event. Like Jake Paul versus Hasim Rahman Jr. is a serious event. And they're using examples of other fights when it comes to this weight discrepancy. It's like, no, stop. Why? Why are you wasting your energy? This isn't meant to be taken seriously. It's a circus act. He hasn't fought a boxer yet. For the love of God, this dude fought a backup point guard, and he outweighed him by 10 pounds. He's fighting washed up UFC fighters. And you expect to get to an event where he fights a real boxer who's been fighting at bridger weight, not even a real division, coming off of a loss, and you expect something real to happen. No. I know Showtime's promoting him as a real fighter. BoxRec, you look up BoxRec, you see 5-0. I get it. WBC is saying if he wins this fight, he gets in the rankings. I get it. But it hurts my heart, like seriously, to see good boxing channels on here. Otherwise, to see like boxing journalists, like nationally, universally seen boxing journalists promoting this as if it's a real event and judging this weight discrepancy as if this is a real discrepancy. It's not. It's not. This is Jake, for the love of God, this is Jake Paul. He was like a Disney kid. Like, you realize that, right? He was a Disney kid. He's making bad raps on YouTube, bad rap videos. And then he comes into the boxing world and he's fighting backup point guards and well beyond their prime UFC fighters. And if you're a boxer and he handpicks you, that means you suck. That means you're not good. You are not good. There's a reason he picked Tommy Fredo Fury and Hasim Rahman Jr. There's a reason for it. They're not good. Like, people don't respect them in the boxing world. He already sparred Hasim Rahman Jr. He's already sized him up. He doesn't care about the weight. So let me try to explain to you what's going on here. Because I see people covering this as if it's a real event. Oh, it's Hasim's fault. He shouldn't have agreed to 200 if he wasn't going to get to 200. Oh, it's of course it's Hasim's fault. Jake Paul. Oh, Jake Paul shouldn't have tried to fight him at 200 pounds knowing he can't get to 200. Guys, That's the point. That's the point. Can't you see this? That's the point. Jake Paul's not worried about Hasim Rahman, whether it be at 200 pounds or 220 pounds. And I see people out there, somebody threw out the example yesterday. It's like a lightweight fighting a super middleweight. Like nobody should expect somebody to outweigh him by 30 pounds and still fight him. Guys, first of all, horrible analogy. As you get up in weight, the weight discrepancy becomes less of a factor. There's a reason that cruiserweight's 175 to 200 and 200 plus is heavyweight. Deontay Wilder was outweighed by what, 40 pounds the first Tyson Fury fight? So horrible example to use. Number two, Jake Paul is not worried about the weight of Hasim Rahman Jr. Number three, you are comparing it to legit boxers and legit boxing matches. This is not that. You got to stop covering Jake Paul as if he's a legit boxer with legit aspirations to be a great boxer. He's not. He says he is, but that's part of the act. It's part of the act. I can't believe, like, I'm seeing boxing journalists and boxing channels battle back and forth as to whose fault this is. Jake Paul's or Hasim Rahman Jr. And Jake Paul has to be sitting back just shocked. Like, I can't believe these people are buying this. I can't believe, like, they're really buying that I was worried about Hasim Rahman's weight. Hasim Rahman Jr.'s weight. Like, I could care less what the guy weighs. Look, guys, this is what's called a parachute clause. Hasim Rahman Jr. has fought anywhere between 211 and a half and 269 over the past however long he's been pro. Everybody knew that signed the contract, that looked over the contract, that this guy wasn't getting anywhere near 200 pounds. They all knew it orally, but they still signed the contract. And they did it for a reason, especially when it comes to Jake Paul. Jake Paul knew, look, let's watch where these guys, let's put in the weight that we have to weigh this guy every so often. And when the 7-day weigh-in comes in, and he's not anywhere close to 200 pounds, because Hasim Rahman knew from the very beginning, he's not getting to 200. Jake Paul knew from the very beginning when he signed the contract, this guy's not getting anywhere close to 200. So for Jake Paul, it works out great. I'm not worried about Hasim Rahman Jr. I don't care if he weighs 200 or 215 when it comes to fight night. It's good for me because for every pound he weighs over, we penalize him. That's more money for me. But if we get close to the fight and it looks like nobody's interested in this pay-per-view, I'll use the weight as an alibi. I'll use it as an excuse to pull a parachute on this fight, and the fight goes away. Canceled. We're not going to put in a late replacement. None of that. Canceled. I know that people don't know Tommy Fury like that. People don't know Hasim Rahman Jr. like that. So we're gonna cleverly put stipulations in this contract to where if it looks like this isn't going to sell, we're going to pull a parachute and the fight goes away. And what happens? The fight goes away. Canceled. That's what happened. Do you really think Jake Paul's worried about if Hasim Rahman weighs 201 or 215? No, he doesn't. Doesn't care. He's not worried about Hasim Rahman Jr. Jake Paul, for the love of God, hasn't fought a real boxer, yet he's still the clear betting favorite against Hasim Rahman Jr. because Hasim Rahman Jr. sucks. I'm sorry if I sound like anti-fighter, but there's a reason he was picked by Jake Paul. And there's a reason Hasim Rahman agreed to get down to 200 because Hasim Rahman is desperate for anything that comes his way. He's got nothing else except being a sparring partner. Like, Bridgerweight's not even a real division. This dude's competing in Bridgerweight. And people are treating this like it's a real discrepancy. No, dude, stop. I'm seeing channels, dude, our lives. Well, it's Hasim Rahman Jr.'s fault. He shouldn't have agreed to 200. It's Jake Paul's fault. He shouldn't have expected him to get down to 200. For the love of God. Like I said, don't show up at the circus and be shocked to see clowns there. Don't treat a Jake Paul event like it's a real boxing event. It's not. It's not. It's Jake Paul. Like, for the love of God, this dude was a Disney kid. I mean, go on YouTube. Like, look at he's doing rap videos. Like, like you realize that, right? Like the chat, put in the chat, yes, that you realize this. You know that Jake Paul's not to be taken seriously as a boxer, right? Correct? We have an intelligent chat here. We know this. We know this. Just put yes, put a thumbs up. You know we don't take Jake Paul seriously. Here's why we don't normally talk about Jake Paul on here. But the reason I'm talking about it is there are legitimate channels and boxing journalists talking about Jake Paul like we should be talking about Jake Paul. And I know why they're doing it, because Jake Paul generates clicks. But come on, guys. Seriously. Nobody was interested in this fight. There's a reason they pulled the plug on this fight, and it had nothing to do with weight. Like, you have to realize that. It had nothing to do with weight. The plug was pulled on this fight. The parachute was open because nobody cared about it. Nobody knows Hasim Rahman Jr. because the casuals don't know Hasim Rahman. They don't know Tommy Fury because a lot of them don't know Tyson Fury. That's the market we're talking about when we talk about Jake Paul. I can't believe there are people who think this fight was called off because of weight. You think this fight was called off because of a weight discrepancy? Jake Paul would have fought this dude at 225 if the numbers were good. Track record. We're going to talk about track record, agendas of certain fighters as this show goes on. The track record. A track record tells us a story about certain fighters, what they're interested in. I was watching a clip the other day. It was Bill Russell talking to Kobe Bryant. Rest in peace to both of them. Giants of the sports world. But Bill Russell pulls Kobe Bryant to the side at a Lakers game or an All-Star game. I don't remember which. He's sitting in the front row and he said, "I appreciate what you're doing. I'm prouder than you if you were I wouldn't be this proud of you if you were my own son." And he said, when I watch players play, I judge a player on what his agenda is on the court. I can tell by watching him what his agenda is. Agenda, identity. Great teams need identities. Great superstars, great athletes need an identity, an agenda. Kobe Bryant's agenda was he was a killer. He had a killer instinct. He was attacking every single person on the court. He was going after everybody. He was going at your neck. He wanted to win. What's his agenda? It's not an accident that I became a Canelo fan and I became a Bam Rodriguez fan. I know their agenda. They want to clear out divisions. They want to fight consistently. They want to be active fighters. They care about legacy. That's their agenda. I can watch certain fighters and tell what their agenda is over a period of time. And you don't even have to watch every fight. You can tell, like, look at BoxRec, look at the CompuBox stats. This is what this type of fighter is. This is how often they fight. This is how often they knock guys out. This is how often they're in championship bouts. I can tell their agenda as a fighter. There's a reason I'm a Jermell Charlo fan, and more on that in a little while as well. He became undisputed at 154. You can talk about how high you think his ceiling is, where you think he's on the pound-for-pound list, but he becomes the guy at 154. That dude, by fighting the top competition in that division over a 5.5-year period, does it consistently, has a loss, knocks the guy out in the rematch. Has a draw, knocks the guy out in the rematch. He's undisputed. And oh, by the way, I'm going to stick around and fight a young lion in the next fight. I'm going to defend my undisputed championship against a young lion. It's not an accident I was a Carl Froch fan. 12-fight run, back to back to back. He's the underdogs in these fights. He wins or loses close. But he sticks around in the division, takes on all comers, exceeds expectations. There's a reason. I knew what his agenda was, and I'm drawn to guys with a certain agenda. Pause. I know what Jake Paul's agenda is from the past couple of years. He fought a backup point guard, for the love of God. He fought multiple, well past their prime UFC fighters and even had rematches with them, for the love of God. He calls out terrible boxers, for the love of God, and then you're going to cover him as if he's a real boxer because Showtime tells you to. Or because the WBC says they're going to rank him in the top 10. For the love of God, snap out of it. There's no weight discrepancy here. None. This was built into the contract. Everybody knew he's not getting down to 200. Everybody knew it. Stevie Wonder could see this guy wasn't getting to 200. Jake knew it. Hasim Rahman knew it. He knew when he signed the contract, I'm not getting down to 200, which is why I'm not playing the small violin for him. Because if he really wanted this money, if he really wanted this payday, he would have killed himself to make 200. Because he's got no other options. After this, you'll never hear from Hasim Rahman Jr. ever again. Ever again. Jake Paul knew he wasn't getting there. Hasim Rahman knew he wasn't getting there when he signed the contract. Which is why I don't feel sorry for any of them, because there's nothing to feel sorry for. Guys, when Jake Paul saw what the numbers were going to generate as far as pay-per-view, when he saw the ticket numbers come in from, as Dana White said, MSG is expensive to rent out. It's expensive. $500,000 to turn the lights on at MSG. When he saw how much he was going to lose on this fight, that nobody cares about this fight, pull the plug. Blamed weight. Perfect alibi. Built into the contract. Parachute clause. So it hurts my heart to see, for the most part, intelligent boxing pundits talk about this as if this is a real discrepancy. It's just not. Need to wake up. And the good news about this is, and I've said it about Tank, I've said it about Ryan, they'll have to do real things when the market gets bored with what they're doing. And this shows you that the market is bored with what Jake Paul's doing. So Jake Paul is going to call out, just watch, Conor McGregor. They're going to try to build up a Jake Paul versus Conor McGregor fight. I can see 3 years into the future. Jake Paul is going to try to stick around, play this game where he fights past prime UFC fighters with names, and then somehow drum up some sort of interest with a Canelo Alvarez fight, say, 3 years from now. And that's going to be his cash-out fight. The WBC is already telegraphing to you that he's going to be a top 10 cruiserweight the next time he wins a fight. A top 10 cruiserweight. So Jake Paul, without having to beat anybody, is going to be able to say, I'm one of the 10 best cruiserweights in the world, and I only have 5 fights. I only have 6 fights. I'm already a top 10 cruiserweight. This is how great I am. And he's going to continue to say, oh, I would knock out Canelo. Oh, split decision victory over Tyson Fury. And the boxing journalists, for their clicks, will continue to ask him stupid questions like this. And he'll continue to give them stupid answers that somehow register. And then 2 to 3 years from now, we'll possibly have Canelo as the WBC cruiserweight champion against WBC ranked Jake Paul, and that will be his cash out fight. That's the end game here. That's the end game. But other than that, man, I'm tired of this. I'm exhausted with it. Don't show up to the circus and be shocked when clowns are there. It's the circus. It's the circus. Please, I hope they don't do Thurman Garcia at 54. We're about to talk about that. Jake Paul is a con artist. Shout out my guy, Nando. Always in the building. Always appreciate the support, Nando. Gary Antoine gets away with lunging in for combinations. Bartholomew. And we're going to get into, let me put a note of that real quick, because I do want to talk about Gary Antoine Russell versus Bartholomew, because I like Gary Antoine Russell and what he brings to the table at 140. 140 is a fun division, and Regis Prograis is about to get a shot at 154, so it's going to be good to see him in the mix as well. NMR 2067 in the building, not being more eyes to the sport. People need to stop saying that. He brings eyeballs to himself and his brand. That's true, and people need to stop acting like Jake Paul is in it for anything more than Jake Paul. Track record, once again. Jake Paul is about Jake Paul. Dan Raphael broke down the Paul Rahman situation on his podcast today. The Rahmans were playing games, never ever lost more than a pound on any mandated weigh-in, hoping to strong arm Paul. Look, I just stick to what I said. Jake Paul wasn't expecting to get down to Rahman to get anywhere close to 200. Rahman wasn't expecting to get close to 200, and this was going to be used as an excuse that the fight wasn't selling well. And that's it. I've been saying this clown is bad for boxing. I keep hearing he brings in new fans to boxing. That's right. And I've exhausted my Jake Paul care. I just wanted to talk about it because the reactions I've been seeing about it. Like this isn't something to be taken serious. This weight discrepancy is not a discrepancy. He's not afraid of Hasim Rahman at 215. He's just not. He's just not. If the fight was selling well, tickets were doing well, if it looked like the pay-per-view numbers were going to do well, he would have fought Hasim Rahman at 215, and he would have hammered Hasim Rahman Jr. when it came to penalties per pound. That's how this was going to play out. And yes, Sean Porter predicted this 2 weeks ago. Sean Porter, you can pull up the video on YouTube. He predicted 2 weeks ago that this exact thing was going to happen. Exact to the T. Hasim Rahman's not getting anywhere close to 200. Jake Paul knows it. This fight's not going to sell well. A week before the fight, they're going to pull the plug on it, and they're going to blame weight. They're going to blame Hasim Rahman Jr. in the weight. Porter called this 2 weeks ago, and he nailed it. He absolutely nailed it. And he's right. He's 100% right. He's 100% right. Prograis about to meet a real boogeyman. Zepeda fights to a level of competition, good and bad. I agree, Nando. Completely agree. Like, that's a hell of a fight. And I like that fight better than Ramirez versus Zepeda, because we're going to see where Prograis at 140. We've been hearing rumors about Prograis being weight drained at 140. Should he be moving up to 147? Prograis is about to get his first big shot since Josh Taylor. It's good. Everybody has Prograis top 2 or 3 in the division talent-wise. What's he going to do against Zepeda? What's he going to do against Zepeda? You're right. Zepeda is going to fight up to the level of competition. And then the winner gets Ramirez. I mean, you can't go wrong there. All across the board, that's great for the division. And 140 is such a strong division. Such a strong division. I like Gary Antoine Russell. Let's talk about that real quick before we get into the Danny Garcia fight. I got a lot to say about that. Gary Antoine Russell, to me, showed some vulnerabilities, but are they really vulnerabilities? Like when you have a face-first fighter, when I think Gary Antoine Russell, I think James Kirkland. And that's in no way a shot at Gary Antoine Russell, because I like James Kirkland a lot. James Kirkland was seen as a guy, when he was with Ann Wolfe in his prime, he was a guy to deal with. Southpaw, can punch, and a high output fighter. He wants to take people's heads off. And this is what I love about fighters. We talk about agendas, like identities. That's his identity. He wants to knock guys out. How can you not like a fighter like that? So even if he's face first at time, even if he leaves himself wide open, in order to counter him, you have to be there to get hit. And that's the thing. Yes, as he showed against Bartholomew, some people call him Bartholomew, I'll call him Bartholomew. As he showed in that fight, he can get countered. But here's the thing. If you watch the Bartholomew fight, Bartholomew was more exciting than normal in this fight. So you ask yourself why. Everybody was commenting about that. Like, I never would have thought that I'd want to see Bartholomew fight again. But this fight had me wanting that. So you ask yourself why. And it could be as you age, your reflexes slow down and you naturally get more exciting. Hopkins got more exciting as time went on. Winky right. But I think it has a lot to do with Gary Antoine Russell. Gary Antoine Russell, when you fight him, you have to have your output is going to go up, because he's going to force you into a fight like that. And when I see this long list of fighters at 140 who are talented, but also exciting and are willing to mix it up with each other, it's why I love 140. It's sort of like the anti-147. 147, you have a bunch of talented guys, but not all of them are stylistically fun to watch, and they're not willing to mix it up with each other. 140, they're willing to mix it up with each other, and you got some fun fighters in there. Ramirez is fun. Zepeda's fun. Prograis fun. Gary Antoine Russell's fun. Josh Taylor's fun. Like, these are fun fighters who are fighting each other in the division. And Gary Antoine Russell adds a name to the mix. So yes, did he show some flaws? Yes. He got hit? Yes. But he's in there with a counterpuncher, and he raised the output of the counterpuncher in the fight. Bartholomew was forced to fight a fight in which was uncomfortable to him. There were rounds when he looked, yes, he was looking good. He was landing some shots, but he was still fighting at a pace and a style that he wasn't comfortable with, and you could see it. And also, Gary Antoine Russell legitimately hurt Bartholomew. Yes, the stoppage was awful. It's one of the worst stoppages I've seen in quite some time. It's like he gets up at 2, 3 at the latest. He puts his hands up. Put your hands up. Yes. Are you okay? Yes. Stop the fight. It's like, what? What just happened? He said yes. He said yes, I'm okay. He said it. He said yes, I'm okay. Yes means no. This is opposite day. You forgot this opposite day. He said yes, but he meant no. He was shaking his head yes, but he meant to shake his head no. It's like, no. You should have let that guy go on, because not only does it rob Bartholomew of a shot of coming back, and you got to remember, Bartholomew's up in age. He just spent 8 weeks to get in shape. You don't know how many more of those you have. You don't know how many more times you'll get to dig into the well. You don't know how many more times you're going to have an opportunity like this to fight on an undercard like this. And he may not have it again. And on top of that, it robs Gary Antoine Russell of a definitive victory. People are going to say, yes, great punch. Yes, he beat Bartholomew, but what if they would have given Bartholomew more time? What if they would let Bartholomew continue to fight on? That's the frustrating part to me, because when I watched this fight, it was trending Gary Antoine Russell as the fight went on. His pressure was going to start to get the best of Bartholomew. Bartholomew's up there in age. He's eventually going to get to him. He's eventually going to knock him out definitively, or the corner is going to be forced to throw in the towel, or the referee will step in for a legitimate stoppage. And not only do you rob Bartholomew of an opportunity to come back in the fight, but you're robbing Gary Antoine Russell of a definitive victory. Definitive victory. And that was a frustrating part as well. Just a bad job with the referee in that fight. And then the 114 scorecard, just awful. Awful. The Canelo Triple G card seems like a good little card. Yep. And it looks like I'll be out there for that one as well. I don't think Jake wanted to fight Rahman. I also don't think these YouTube fights have any interest with the boxing matches. Shout out Punch Perfect Boxing in the building. Go subscribe to him. Larry Liston in here as well. Shout out JC. JC in the building. Josh Taylor days at the top are over. He's food. Now, Josh Taylor is going to be moving up to 147. I think he just wants his rematch. He wants his revenge. Jack Catterall, he wants to shut Jack Catterall up and then move up to 147. So I don't think Josh Taylor is going to be seen as a player at 140 in the future. He's going to drop those other 2 belts after the Catterall fight, leave a vacuum there. There's going to be more vacant shots for other guys. And there's going to be this vacuum at 140. And guys have shown, like, track record. We talk about track record. There's a track record at 140 of the top fighting the top. So guys are going to fight for those vacant belts, and there's going to start to be unifications as well, mandatories, and you're going to get good fights at 140. It's one of those divisions like 154, 115, where guys fight each other. They fight each other. Unlike 147 and 160, which we'll talk about, unfortunately, in a minute when it comes to Danny Garcia. Typical PBC stoppage, seen it so many times with their A side, is in trouble. Possibly. I like Gary Antoine Russell, though. I think there's a market there for him. Even if he can't get to the tippy top of the division, he's going to be in fun fights. He's going to be in fun fights. That guy tries to take your head off. He's going to be an entertaining fighter to watch. That's where I'm at with Gary Antoine. Would have kicked his anyway in only a matter of time. I agree. I think he would have legitimately stopped Bartholomew as the fight went on. They have to run it back. No guarantee that Russell was going to win. And that's fair as well. And that's what Bartholomew's side is saying. Shout out G Funky in the building. If you're not following him, go Sub to him. And you're right. That's what Bartholomew's side is saying is this can't end this way. We need to run it back. Whether that's the case or not, I don't know. But that's the frustrating part about this is we should have gotten a definitive answer in this fight. And it robs Gary Antoine Russell as well of that definitive answer. Like, I would have definitively stopped this guy. I think that's what would have happened. But there's no guarantee that that would have happened. Maybe Bartholomew buys some time and figures it out. Maybe so. He's a vet. He's clever. That's the frustrating thing about this is we may have to go back and revisit this. I like Russell, but they give him free B, A grade with one without even completing the test. Shoe shine in the boxing, go sub to him as well. It was a great scrap till the stoppage. I like the fight. That was a fun fight. The Kaunaki fight was a fun fight. And I don't know, the thing I loved about the Kaunaki fight, Kaunaski, however you pronounce it, however people like to pronounce it. I butcher names here. That's what I do. When you have a heavyweight that throws 100 punches per round, it's like, how could you not like that guy? How could you not like it? And I hope he continues to fight because I don't care who it's against. I don't care if he wins or loses. He's one of those fighters to me. He loses this fight. I had him losing the fight, 6-4. He loses the fight. But guess what? I want to see him again. I want to see the fight again. I want to see the dude fight again. I could watch Glaunoski lose 5 straight fights like this. Like, I'm still here. I'm still a consumer of his content. I'll watch Glaunoski lose 5-6 straight fights. I'm still here for it. This dude is a heavyweight. He looks like your average Joe walking down the street. And yet this dude comes in there as a heavyweight and he's throwing 100 punches per round. Like, who does that? So he'll never be the heavyweight champion of the world. He'll never even come close. And it's a historically weak heavyweight division. But guess what? Guess what? I want to watch the dude fight. Agendas, identities. His identity, to me, is a fun fighter. He's a fun fighter. Put him in there again. Put him in there. I'll watch the dude fight again. I wasn't impressed with Garcia. That fight was terrible. Benavidez didn't stand a chance. And yes, let's get into the Danny Garcia fight. A win is a win. Don't dwell in the past. Gary Antoine Russell had cast on that fight. His output could have slowed down like his brother. Shame it was a great fight. Let's see. Porto Source Central BXO in the building. My guy, Boxing Historian 206 in the building. I shouldn't put Boxing Historian 206 as comment up there though, because I might get some hate. Boxing Historian 206, the hated man on the YTBC. I might get some hate, right? I better not put him on my panel. Yeah. Turkish guy won't amount to ish, but good for him. Good win. And I liked him too. And you got to remember, Glaunoski was the underdog coming into this fight. I believe he was a 2.5-1 underdog in this fight. So our guy from Turkey can fight. He can fight. And they just made beautiful music together. That was a great matchup. Fun fight. Calix is a casual boxing fan. Kaunaki is a punching bag. I don't want to see Kaunaki and Jose Benavidez fight again. And look, I can do without seeing Jose Benavidez Jr. fight again for sure. But Kaunaski, I can watch fight a million times. Dude's fun to me. But let's talk about Danny Garcia and let me ruffle some feathers. Because I have a feeling this is what some of the negative comments are about. Danny Garcia, let's talk about this fight realistically and what it was. And we can always paint a picture of what a matchup is going to be by the Vegas odds makers. And when they price the fight correctly, and we think they price the fight correctly, what do we say on this channel? We say, I don't see value in this fight. And that's what happened last week. I broke down the odds, and the odds were Danny Garcia is a -800 favorite. And what that tells us is you got to put down $800 on Danny Garcia just to win 100. So the odds makers are telling you Danny Garcia is not going to lose this fight. Benavidez was a minus 550 underdog, huge underdog. What it also told us, over under was 10 and a half rounds. And the over was in the minus 270. So I've told you this ad nauseum on this channel. Anytime you see anytime you see over under 10 and a half rounds with the over on the minus, they're telling you that this fight more than likely is going the distance, which is weird for two fighters who can't move. Two fighters who can't move. But what they have is both have good chins. They both have good chins, but neither one of them can punch at 154. Two welterweights whose power will not translate at 154. This fight could have been at 147, and it still would have been the same thing. And you got to give them that. Two things I've always said about Danny Garcia that I respect the hell out of him about is hell of a chin. Hell of a chin on the guy. The guy can take a punch. Number two, I respect the hell out of any fighter who is willing to stand in the pocket and put everything he has into a punch. People who have never fought or sparred in the gym don't know how difficult that is, to stand in the pocket knowing that a counter could come your way and putting everything you have into a punch, completely loading up on a shot, leaving your chin out there. And Danny Garcia has been willing to do that throughout his career. And you can tell he has a great chin because he's been willing to do that. He's a stationary fighter, yet he's taken big counter shots and has never been knocked out. It's two things he's got, but it's two things that won't translate at 154. And Danny Garcia and his team know this. They know this. And the reason they know this is their actions tell us that. First of all, common sense tells us this, because 140, he had a great run. 147, mixed bag, decent run. Not a great run. He never had his big win at 147. The three times he stepped up at 147, he fell short. So now he moves to 154, now knowing that he's exhausted his options at 147. He doesn't want to stay at 147 because if he stays at 147, he's a stationary target for the young lions coming up. Nobody wants to see him fight Spence again. He's not going to fight Terrence Crawford. Nobody wants to see the Keith Thurman fight at 147 or 154. We'll talk about that in a minute. So he would be a stationary target for the guys moving up the ranks, and he would become a glorified gatekeeper that. So we look for new scenery at 154. Let's move up to 154. So last week we talked about what's the end game at 154 for Danny Garcia. Because since he didn't have a great run at 147, he's trending down. So why would we think he would have this renaissance at 154? What's the end game here? Is the end game trying to leverage him into a Jermell Charlo fight, just keep him busy a couple fights at 154, then try to leverage him into the Jermell Charlo fight at 154? We asked that question last week. We also said last week, there isn't a guy that I see in the top 10 at 154 that Danny Garcia could beat, in my opinion. I don't think he beats any of them. I don't think he's a top 10 154 pounder. I don't even know if he's a top 10 147 pounder right now. I'm just being honest with you. Yes, he looked great, but he's supposed to look great against Jose Benavidez Jr. Who is Jose Benavidez Jr. right now? Jose Benavidez Jr., leading up to this fight, fought once in the past 4 years. Inactive fighter. And he's an inactive fighter for a reason. He's been having issues with his right leg since he got shot in his right leg 2016. Has never been the same fighter since. You saw it in this fight. He's dragging his leg across the ring. Can't move laterally. Danny Garcia would throw a couple of shots, combination punches, move laterally, get out of there. And it was a smart strategy. He looked like freaking, he looked like Floyd Mayweather Jr. with his hand speed in there, because compared to Jose Benavidez Jr., his hand speed was off the charts. His lateral movement's off the charts. But when Danny Garcia's lateral movement looks great, you know the other fighter is slow, because Danny Garcia is a flat-footed fighter himself. So it played out how we expected it to play out. A wide Danny Garcia victory going to decision. That's how Vegas told you the fight was going to play out. We said there's no value in this fight because the fight's not going to go under. Neither guy's going to knock each other out. And Benavidez Jr. is incapable of pulling off an upset here. He just doesn't have it in the tank. And you saw it in this fight. He could throw 1 or 2 punches at a time, try to counter, land a big shot, but it never developed. It never developed because Benavidez Jr. is a welterweight puncher, not a 154-pound puncher, and Danny Garcia has a hell of a chin. He's already shown that his chin can take the best shots at 147. So why would we think a guy who wasn't a big puncher at 147 would knock him out? So no value in betting this fight. It played out exactly the way the odds makers said it would. So going forward, what happens? Danny Garcia gets on the mic after the fight, and he says, they ask him who he wants to fight, thinking Tony Harrison. Like, did they really think he was going to say, yes, I'll fight Tony Harrison? Did they really think he said, yes, I'm going to fight Erickson Lubin? Yes, I'll fight Sebastian Fundora. Yes, of course I'll fight Jermell Charlo if that fight presents itself. Danny Garcia knows, even if he doesn't want to admit it to himself when he looks in the mirror, he instinctively knows he can't compete with those guys at 154. His team knows it for sure. So you saw some direction probably before the fight and saying, you know what, we should go in this direction after, this direction after. So who does Danny Garcia call out? And this tells you everything. We talked about the end game last week. We didn't know what it would be. He's telling you right now after the fight. He says, I want to fight Keith Thurman at 154, or I want to fight Erislandy Lara at a 155-pound catchweight. So that told us everything we needed to know right there. That told us that this run at 154 is not a genuine 154-pound run. And by the way, hit that like button as y'all come in, and I'll get the comments in a minute. I'll definitely get the comments in a minute. Hit that like button, please. If you do one thing, hit that like button. And sub if you're not sub. He's telling you he's not interested in fighting anybody at 154. Because none of the guys in the top 10 he called out. And look, these are all makeable fights. They're all makeable fights. All makeable fights. I'm told all the time, this fight's not realistic, that fight's not realistic. Well, according to you, all of these fights are realistic. Multiple PBC fighters at the top. There's a PBC division at 154. Danny Garcia doesn't call out any of them. Not one. So I asked myself, who is interested in seeing Keith Thurman versus Danny Garcia 2 at 154? Why would you want to see that? And then on top of that, what Danny Garcia is doing here is he's trying to win the middleweight title by fighting the weakest champion at middleweight who is well past his prime. And he's only going to do it 1 pound higher than the 154-pound limit, 155. He's going to try to pick off that middleweight title. And look, there's no difference in fighting. Actually, it's easier to fight Erislandy Lara for the middleweight title at 155 than it is to fight Jermell Charlo at 154 for the junior middleweight title. And this is how these guys run this game. I call it the multi-division scam that multiple guys are running. It's the divisional scam. I talked about Tank running this scam, Ryan running this scam currently. I believe it was DAZN or Golden Boy who came out today and said they want to do Jaime Munguia versus Ryder in the next fight. And in a vacuum, this is a good fight. In a vacuum. Jaime Munguia versus John Ryder is a good fight in a vacuum. But once again, I asked myself, what weight's that going to be at? It's going to be a super middleweight. So we go from Jaime Munguia possibly fighting top middleweights to now he's going to fight a top 10 super middleweight, which once again, we'll be able to get a good gauge of who Jaime Munguia is as a fighter by fighting Ryder. Don't mistake what I'm saying. In a vacuum, this is a good fight on the surface. But once again, what's going on in the middleweight division? We talk about needing simplicity in the boxing world. More than ever, we need simplicity, not complexity. This sport has become too complex. By the day, it's becoming more complex to follow. It's going the opposite direction of society. Society wants simple, simple, simple. And every great product is simple anyway. It's easy to figure out. I've said it multiple times throughout this channel in the past decade. To the casuals, even after a great fight comes confusion. You start to break down what's this guy at, what's that guy at, who's the WBO champion, who's the WBA champion, what networks they're each fighting on, why this fight can't happen next, and they just lose interest. They're saying, yeah, that was a great fight, but just wake me up when the next great fight comes around. I don't need to follow the sport. You can follow it for me, and I'll show up every once in a while. Because they don't want to follow something that's so complex. It's what makes the UFC great for them to follow. The UFC came in and said, we're going to simplify everything. Less weight divisions, one title list, clear ranking system that makes sense. So after a great fight, we know who's going to fight who next, and they generally get it right. That's what makes boxing a frustrating sport to follow. But when you have guys campaigning in multiple different divisions at once, they're not campaigning in any divisions. What I mean is these guys can sort of hide. 154, 160, 168, what's he campaigning at? So it's harder to call this guy out because if you're middleweight, am I calling him out? Is he a super middleweight? I'm confused. He's at 168 now? Okay. If I'm David Morrell Jr., I'll call him out. No, I'm at 160. So where am I supposed to call him out at? What weight's he campaigning at? This is why I spoke about Jermell Charlo earlier. The reason I love Jermell Charlo is I know what the product is. I know his agenda. I know his identity. I'm going to run through 154. I'm going to fight the top guys there. If they happen to beat me or I get a draw, I'm going to try to fight him again. I'm going to knock him out. And I'm going to stick around and defend against the young lions. He's easy to follow. We know he's consistently going to show up. When these guys campaign at multiple different divisions at once, it's tougher to follow him. What division is he campaigning at? So when we talk about Munguia, when we talk about the middleweight division, what do we make of the middleweight division right now? Just think about middleweight. Like Munguia moves into the division, we're like, oh yeah, it's about to get more exciting, fun fighter. Now he's talking about going to 168. Boo Andre, he's supposed to fight Zach Parker at 168, pulls out of the fight. Is he at 168? Is he at 160? They mandate the fight to fight Janibek. So is he going to fight Janibek or not? The next day he comes on and he calls out Chris Eubank Jr. Chris Eubank Jr. is out there calling out Jake Paul and Conor Benn. Different divisions, a cruiserweight and a welterweight. Jermell Charlo, he pulls out a Selecki fight. What's happening with him next? He calls out Oscar De La Hoya. And then he calls out Demetrius Andrade, who we know they're not going to fight each other. So what are these guys at middleweight doing? What's happening at middleweight? Is Charlo a 160 pounder or is he 168? Is Andrade a middleweight or is he a super middleweight? Is Munguia a middleweight or a super middleweight? It's a multi-division scam to where they can hide, they can keep the target off of their back because they're not stationary in a division. They're not campaigning in a single division. But at the same time, they can get accolades and extra credit from journalists who are giving them extra credit for fighting in multiple divisions. I hear it all the time. Like the new standard for Hall of Fame is if you're a 4-division champion, you're a Hall of Famer. Mikey Garcia, 4-division champion, put him in the Hall of Fame. Adrian Broner, 4-division champion, put him in the Hall of Fame. So the new thing is let's move through division and try to pick off easy Reggie belts or the easiest champion in a division and become a multi-division champion. But what division are these guys campaigning in? Simplify it. I quite like dudes who stay in a single division throughout most of their career and take on all comers. That's what Bernard Hopkins did for most of his career, correct? Marvin Hagler did it for most of his career. That's why it's tough to see somebody, for me, who's been following boxing for decades. It's tough for me to see middleweights not want to campaign at middleweight. It's a sexy division. Like, this is one of the traditional boxing divisions. It's supposed to be held to a higher standard. So when I see junior middleweights not want to move up to middleweight, in Jermell Charlo's case, and then Sebastian Fundora's case, and then I see middleweights want to get the hell out of middleweight to super middleweight because maybe Canelo's up there, it's tough to swallow. Tank Davis has been doing this for a while at lightweight. Tank Davis moves up. Tank Davis will fight a junior lightweight at lightweight. Tank Davis will move up to 140 to try to pick off the easiest Reggie belt. So after the Matteo Barrios fight, when he picks off that Reggie belt, a guy like Regis Prograis tweets, I want to fight Tank Davis. And Tank Davis, it seems like, no, wait. This is a one-off. We're lightweight. Josh Taylor calls him out at 140, and Leonard Ellerby's like, he's got nothing to offer. Well, Leonard, he's got all of the belts to offer. And on top of that, you just fought Matteo Barrios. Josh Taylor's a bigger name than him. We're not worried about belts. And that's the two-part scam of this, of keeping the target off your back. You say you're not worried about real championships because you don't want the responsibility that comes along with real championships. And on top of that, you don't campaign in a single weight class at a time because you're a more stationary target in that weight class if you're campaigning in that weight class. So Tank says, no, I'm a lightweight. I'm moving back down. Ryan Garcia fights two lightweights at 140 in his comeback. And he'll likely fight Jojo Diaz at 140, another lightweight. So once these junior welterweights, 140, start to get a whiff of this, they're going to say, wait a second, you're at 140 now. This is 3 fights at 140. You're saying that you're fighting at 140. Fight a real fighter at 140. Come fight me. Come fight Regis Prograis. Come fight Zepeda. Come fight Ramirez. Come fight Gary Antoine Russell. And that's when Ryan's going to say, whoa. I'm a lightweight. I'm fighting lightweights. I'm a lightweight. I want to fight Tank. And that's a scam these guys are running. Once they're called out by a serious contender, a serious fighter in their weight class, they can just point to the other weight class and say, hey, I'm in the rankings over there. I'm a lightweight. Leave me alone. I'm a lightweight. I'm not worried about championships anyway. Didn't you hear me? I'm not worried about belts. It's a new era. Not worried about belts. Not worried about it. And that's what these guys do. And that's what Danny Garcia is doing here. He's trying to disguise himself. He's a chameleon, just like these other guys. Jake Paul just did it with weight, right? He's saying, I'm a cruiserweight. You were 215. You should have made 200. It's what these guys do with the weight. And Danny Garcia is going to say, yes, I'm at 154, but I want to fight Keith Thurman at 154. When Tony Harrison comes calling, when Tony Harrison knocks at the door, no, I want to fight Keith Thurman. Like, don't you guys get it? Like, seriously, I'm just telling the fans that I'm at 154. I'm just telling them I'm serious about this. Like, we're both fighters here. Don't you get it? I'm not serious about this. I want to fight the welterweight at 154. I want to fight Keith Thurman at 154. I want to fight Erislandy Lara at 155. And this isn't just me calling out Danny Garcia because I'm not a big fan of Danny Garcia. I've said this about Cotto. If you look at Cotto's run, Cotto, to his credit, at least fought 8 fights at junior middleweight. But Cotto would run this game at middleweight where he would start to use, and people use this against him, remember? Where he was the B side, Manny Pacquiao. So he figured, once I get the power, once I'm the A side, I'm going to use this against other fighters. Margarito had to fight at catchweight in the second fight against Cotto, I believe. But Cotto, when he went up to 160, he fought Martinez at catchweight. Cotto then fought Daniel Gill, I believe, at 157. I believe him and Canelo fought at 155. It's like, dude, there are already 17 weight classes in boxing. That's already too many. And the WBC now has 18 weight classes. They have a division called Bridgerweight, named after a kid that got eaten by a dog or something. So now they got 18 weight classes in the WBC when we're supposed to be simplifying. So now you want to create weight classes within weight classes with the catch weight. So when Danny Garcia says 155, no, you want to fight Erislandy Lara, go up to 160. You're going to drain a dude that's way past his prime in order to say you won the middleweight title. And I called it out when Cotto did it. It's like, no, dude, the lineal championship at middleweight should not be fought at 155. It should not be fought at 157. It should not be fought at 158. This is the lineal championship. This goes generations and generations and generations back. Show some respect. This is the history of our sport. And you're going to create another weight class within a weight class just so you can keep your belt or make it easier to keep your belt or make it easier to get the belt. You're going to use your A-side leverage in order to get that. And D-Style's right when he's against catchweight. This is what he means. This is what he means. Fight at the damn limit. There are 17 weight classes. If you count the WBC, there's 18 with Bridgerweight. That's enough weight classes to carry on your business. And you're going to drain a dude 5 pounds just so you can try to win the middleweight title late in your career. I'm not for it. I wasn't for it. My favorite fighter of the modern era, Miguel Cotto, when he was doing it, wasn't for it. To this day, not for it. I think it was bogus. I think it was bullcrap that he was fighting at catch weights. He never fought at the 160-pound limit. If you're not going to fight at the middleweight limit, don't fight at middleweight. And that's where I'm at with Danny Garcia, too. I'm going to stay consistent. And people can call me anti-fighter all you want. I'm not. When it comes to, I spoke about the Bill Russell, Kobe Bryant exchange. When we talk about agendas for fighters, each fighter has their agenda, and you can see it with their track record and how they fight in the ring, how they carry out their career. Is no different with boxing channels. I may get it wrong from time to time. I'm not perfect. I'm not. But my clear, concise agenda on this channel is a boxing fan speaking to boxing fans. I'm not above anybody in the chat at all. At all. I'm not a journalist. I'm not any of that. I'm just a dude here talking with the chat and to people in the archives. That's it. That's it. But my agenda is a boxing fan speaking to other boxing fans, and I'm going to be an unapologetic boxing fan, demanding the things that I want as a boxing fan from the promoters, managers, and fighters, and network execs, and sanctioning bodies. And I'm going to be unapologetic in that. But simplicity, once again, some of these channels have become too complex because they're all over the place. They can't claim to be pro-fighter, but what it is they're only pro-fighter when it comes to certain fighters. When it comes to certain fighters, they will break their rules. When it comes to other fighters, they'll throw them under the bus. And they'll certainly throw fighters from previous generations under the bus in order to cater to the new era fighter. You have to be consistent in whatever your agenda is. You have to have an identity. This goes for everybody, no matter what sector of the world you're in. No matter what you're doing, every product has to be simple, and it has to have a clear agenda, a clear identity. And the frustrating thing about watching a lot of these channels is they'll break that identity for certain fighters. You were against the catch weight here, but now you're okay with catch weights. It's like, wait a second. Wait a second. You're for fighter safety over here, but not so much over there. And then you'll get mad at me. You'll claim I'm anti-fighter. Not. I'm not. I respect the fighters. They bleed, they sweat. I respect the hell out of them. But at the end of the day, the fans make this thing go as well. You need our money, so you need to give me something in exchange for that money. So when I'm paying more and more and getting less and less, that's where I have a problem. So if you want to call it anti-fighter, go ahead. But I'll leave you with this. Don't become so pro-fighter that you're anti-boxing fan. Don't become so pro-fighter that you become anti-boxing fan. You're still a boxing fan. You have to speak up for boxing fans. You have to demand certain things as a boxing fan. And when I see a guy say he wants to make a legitimate run at 154, and then he's calling out a 147 pounder at 154, and he's calling out a 160 pounder at 155, I'm like, whoa, that's not what y'all were telling me this was. That's not it. And I also don't want to hear that a dude coming off of 19-month layoff deserves a sparring session main event coming off a 19-month layoff, and then deserves to fight a 147 pounder at 154 and then a 160 pounder at 155. And if I'm against that, then I'm anti-fighter. I don't want to hear it. Don't want to hear it. And I'm not naming names. I'm not going to do that until it comes time when I have to name names. But they know who they are. They know they watch this channel. They know I'm speaking of them. And eventually they'll come to the table, and eventually we'll get after that. But it is what it is, man. Like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear that I'm anti-fighter. I know you're talking about me. I'm pro-fighter. I appreciate the fighters. But this era of fighters are giving us the least amount of things to look forward to of any generation of fighters. So if you've been here for generations, you know how frustrating this is. And I don't feel bad at all for calling these things out and demanding more as a fight fan, because you have no problem in going up on my apps. You have no problem charging me more for ESPN Plus, DAZN. You have no problem charging me pay-per-views on DAZN now, which you told me you weren't going to do. PBC told me they were giving me free fights 6-7 years ago. How's that going? Now all of their fights are pay-per-views. Like I said, I'm going out to Golovkin versus Canelo. I'm putting food on these fighters' tables because I'm purchasing these things. I'm not streaming them. I'm going to fights, but I'm paying $800 round trip. I'm paying $1,000 for a hotel room. I'm likely looking at $1,500 to $2,000 for a good ticket to Canelo versus Golovkin. So they have no issue in charging me and not dropping the price, and at the same time giving me less. So I'll have no issue and no regrets calling them out and demanding more. None at all. Not at all. You can call that anti-fighter all you want, but this dude had 19 months off. 19 months off. And came back and fought in a glorified sparring session. This was set up for him to look good. Look, man, I would have much rather seen a good main event. A good main event. I'm barely getting main event fights. I'm getting, like, Danny Garcia versus Jose Benavidez Jr. should have been on an undercard. I'm sorry. Should have been on an undercard. That's what you're spending your budget on. Garcia versus Benavidez Jr. main event. That should have been an undercard fight. That should have been a lower budget fight. And I'm not supposed to have a problem with that. I'm sorry, I do. But these dudes, I want to see more of them campaign in a single weight class. I want to see more of them go for championships. This is a sport. It has to resemble a sport. I've said this a million times. It's best when it resembles a sport. From April to beginning of July, this sport was moving. It was beautiful. Fighters fighting each other, putting on great performances. I look at the second half of this boxing schedule. It stinks. Ugh. Yuck. Disgusting. It's quite the dichotomy. It has to resemble a sport. So I want to see guys plant themselves in the division. I don't mind at all what Errol Spence Jr. is doing. And I don't subscribe to this notion that in order to be high on a pound-for-pound list, you have to move through multiple divisions. I don't agree with that. If you dominate your division, you become undisputed, you belong on a pound-for-pound list. And this is another thing right here. Shout out Haplo. Just caught this out the corner of my eye. Even when these guys put on great performances, you don't know when you're going to see them again. And this is, once again, agenda, identity. I know when I'm going to see Canelo come back, win or lose. I know when I'm going to see Bam Rodriguez come back, win or lose. And I know these guys want to dig into a division and win. They've been talking about Bam possibly moving down to 112, all that stuff. But guess what? He's staying at 115. He's trying to dominate the division. Canelo tried to dominate 168. Tested the waters at 175, but he did that after he cleaned out 168. And I think he'll circle back to Benavidez next year, the number 2 guy at 168. He'll likely eventually fight Morrell Jr. He has that track record. So I trust these guys. I know what their identity is. I know what their agenda in the sport is. When I see guys moving up and down weight classes and not fighting the top guys in that weight class, it turns me off. I'm sorry. So that's when I bring up Munguia versus John Ryder, I say, you know what? On the surface, that's a good fight. On the surface, a good fight. But why I don't like it is it's what some of these guys are doing. And if you look at the track record of guys who do this, they're not fighting the top competition, top 5 guys in that division. That's what makes me back away from it. But even if they put on great performances, it's one thing I got to give Munguia. Munguia fights consistently, multiple times per year. But some of these other guys, Danny Garcia wins. When are we going to see him again? Is it going to be winter 2023? Who knows? Is he going to come back before the next Halley's Comet? Who knows? Will he never have another panic attack? I don't know. I don't know. So on that note, man, I'm out of here. I'll be back tomorrow with D-Style Boxing. I appreciate y'all tuning in as always. God bless.